Hey, 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 welcome to Conversations with Robbin. Conversations that empower, inspire, and enlighten. Every week, we have different guests on our show where we understand how did they become the person that they are today. So sit back, relax as we deep dive and enjoy the ride. So today I have Valerie Probstfeld on with Conversations with Robbin. It is an honor to have you on, Valerie. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be on your podcast today, Robbin.
Yes. So Valerie, you have founded the online community To Mom is to Love to encourage love as an action while living life more authentically. She writes and talks about anxiety, mindset, neuroplasticity, neuroscience, mindfulness, gratitude, and generational legacies. She also has a podcast where she discusses and hosts real topics for moms along with guest speakers. So, Valerie, what does To Mom is to Love mean to you?
Sure. It's kind of an evolving thing. I feel like there's so much it means, and it's also so simple at the same time. So for me, which may be different for each mom, but for me, I feel like I want to utilize my verb as to mom, as opposed to my title mom, which can sometimes just society, myself, everyone has so many expectations of my title or my noun as mom. But when I utilize my verb, then I can control that. I can do something with that. So how I came up with this was when I became a mom. When I was pregnant beforehand, and even probably prior. Well, actually, I know prior because as a nurse practitioner, I worked in pediatrics. So I studied for families, child development, all of these things, because I just knew that I wanted to be a different mom from how I grew up. But I didn't really know what it was like before I was a mom. So I was like, I'm going to study for this and just get an A+ on the motherhood examination. And I remember being pregnant, just not really living in the moment, like writing, reading, just everything I could on how I'm gonna just be an amazing mom. So within about 10 minutes of my child being born, she was actually taken to the NICU, and my illusion of control just vanished. And I'm like, well, I did not study for this. I don't know how to do this. Like, how do I navigate something that I can't control? So, fast forward a few years, my NICU baby is now almost 8 years old, and she's doing great. And she's very verbose. Like, she'll tell me, like, Mom, you're yelling, or you're doing, you're just, you have an angry face or something like that. And so I don't realize it sometimes. And I'm glad she brings that up to me. And when I first heard her, I'm like, you know what, we had one of those Nest cams, for, I think we had a sitter or something recently. And I was like, I had it running or something, like my sitter was doing great. It was just like, we had one of those things like that you have, and I kept it running. And I remember, I'm like, well, that video is still running. Let me watch it to see, was I actually yelling at my daughter? Because I didn't think I was, but apparently she thinks I had an angry face and I was yelling. So I did. And gosh, I sounded so different than what was in my head. And it kind of was, oh, wow, this is something that's a lot harder than I thought it was. It isn't really, I don't have control over this. And sometimes it sounds like I can't even control my yelling. And it's just so frustrating. So what I did at that point in time was look up mom in the dictionary, because I like to write, and that's therapeutic for me. So let me see what that means. And mom, according to Merriam-Webster, is to give birth or rise, or to care for and protect. And then I saw that they had a verb there, which essentially it had the same thing. But I thought about that and I'm like, well, what gives birth and cares and protects? That really is love. Like, love gives birth, love cares and protects, love allows us as moms to rise.
Mm.
And really, at the end of the day, that's all I can control. Like, I am not a perfect mom. I'm an imperfect mom, but I'm an imperfect mom who loves. And that really is all that matters. And so that's where I kind of came up with this verb to mom. Not that I came up with it, but I kind of like, I like that definition that, the dictionary has, as opposed to more of, what we're more used to hearing. And then another reason why I thought of that was because when I was in the hospital, as well as, just going to doctor's visits and stuff, even going to school, they'll always say, mom, like, do you understand this, mom? Do you have any questions, mom? But they don't really call you by your name as much. And it's like, well, why does identity have to be removed when we're mom? Like, there's so much to us, and we have to fill our cups up in order to be able to care, for our kids and our family. And doing that all in the name of love is really all I can control at the end of the day.
Yes. I love that. I love that. And it's interesting how, like, when you first had this idea of when you were pregnant, like, okay, I'm going to control this, I'm going to control that, but it's like we can't control anything. And
Yeah,
that's what we learn, like, how do we just let go? So that's
absolutely.
interesting. As a mom, how do you find balance in being a mom, a wife, and Valerie, just yourself?
So I think for me, and it depends on like the stage of life, I would say, like with the kids, when they're babies, it was a little bit more challenging to find that time. But now that the kids are in school, I'm able to have a little bit of time to myself. But even so, I feel like, I'm like just a driver driving the kids from one activity to the next. So really just trying to, first of all, recognize that I do need to take time for myself, because I think sometimes we don't even recognize that, we're constantly giving to our kids, we're giving to our families, whatever that may be, but not necessarily our cup. And so what I did one day, I remember looking at a value sheet. It was actually the idea was from a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I believe it's Dr. Stephen Covey. Great book. And it's a pretty long read, so it took me a while to get through it. But he talked about values lists, and values is kind of subjective. I mean, we have values, like core values or whatever. But if you go online or look at his book, like if you just search value lists, there's a bunch of them that will come up with like 50 or so adjectives of, learning, exploration, teaching, love, friendship, those type of things. And all of these lists encourage you to pick 3 to 5 of them. And what are your top values? So what I did was I noticed that adventure, learning, exploration, those were some of my values. And every person's different, so you may not necessarily have those values, but you have other values. So trying to incorporate that into my life, it has been very helpful for me. So like, I will take the kids on walks. Like, I know, like, I love being outdoors, exploring. So let's go take a hike. Like, it's in the Chicago area right now, it's like the leaves are turning, which is fun to like point out that and learn about why they change colors. I decided just randomly, like, I like to do fun things with the kids. Sometimes it's like, I don't know if that was such a great idea, like in retrospect. Like, I know, like one time I decided, we live fairly close to the school, and I'm like, let's go it was a blizzard. I'm like, let's take a sled and go to the school. And like, Like in my mind, like I'm thinking it's gonna be a
It
Hallmark
was a
movie.
great idea, right?
It was not didn't turn out the way I thought it would. I had like 2 out of 3 kids crying and only fit one of them. And so, one day they're going to be like, Mom, they're all probably going to remember that. And it's like, I tried, I thought it was going to be good. But anyway, so
But hey, you tried.
yes,
had this great idea in your head and you were going with it.
we were going with it. One of the moms I remember were like pulling over, being like, "Are you okay, Valerie? Like, do you need a ride?" So, but we do these things, and like, I again love learning and new experiences. So actually, with my older one, we went last year for an overnight at like the Chicago Field Museum and spent the night in the museum, and it was just like such a cool experience. And so those type of things for me fill me. But there's a book that talks about double dipping essentially, and how can you do something for yourself but also enjoy the kids enjoy it too. So it's kind of a win-win. So what I do sometimes is, maybe my youngest wants to spend time with me, but I need to go running or I need to exercise, so let's go. I'll put her in the stroller and we'll go running. Or, sometimes it's just not, it's so nice out right now. The evenings are cooler, but they're not too cold. So let's go outside and go walk around. But also let's go have ice cream or something like that. But it doesn't have to be like buying things or doing things. It's just spending time and living in the moment, being in the present, taking all the colors and the sounds in. And but again, I think the first step is just recognizing what are your values and just incorporating them more into your life, and talking about that with your kids and saying like, this is what I like to do. What do you like to do? And having those conversations.
Mm-hmm. It's important to stay present and in the moment. I know with you were saying in the beginning where you actually looked at that video and in your mind you thought that you were doing something else, but like I feel like as moms we tend to get frustrated too with a lot of things because we have so much going on. But you're right, just staying present and just taking like just a deep breath makes such a big difference, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Like, yeah.
It really does.
How do you stay present in situations like that, and just like chaotic situations? Is it
Sure.
just going out in nature for you, or is it more like journaling? Because I know you said you like to write.
Yeah, I think, well, a good example right now is I am watching out my window, my kids right now gathering sticks, and I'm trying to see if I need to like intervene. And so what I do is take a deep breath and think, okay, here's the present moment, and the kids are having fun right now. I can see them, they're gathering sticks, looks like they're playing together, and they're playing nicely. Like I'm just looking, because I'm looking at them out the window, and I'm observing things, like I'm observing all of that. So kind of like observing from like obviously it's from my own eyes, but from like an observer's point of view. So that helps. And what I talk about a lot of times is back roads and highways. So mental back roads are essentially things that we want to do more of, but it's just a little harder to do. And mental highways are things that are very easy to do, and I will do it like quickly. So what I wanted to do just now is to like get up and say, what are you guys doing? Like, why are you, playing with that? But then it's like, well, let me think about, do I need to do that right now in the moment? And why, like if we're late and we're yelling it because we need to get in the car and do this. And then it's like, well, wait a second. Why we do these things is because we have a fight, flight, or freeze response from the amygdala that is a primitive part of our brains. Like all animals share it. And if we feel like something bad is going to happen if we're running late, it doesn't necessarily matter if it will or not. The amygdala is triggered saying like that this is danger, so I'm going to respond in a fighting, yelling kind of way. But So we have to take a back road sometimes in our minds, back to that prefrontal cortex area in our brain, to say, well, no, not necessarily amygdala. Like nothing bad is likely going to happen. So what can I do in the moment? How can I override it? How can I take that back road instead of that highway of, yelling or frustrated when I have that knee-jerk reaction to do that or to worry about something, which for me right now, for example, was being mindful, like looking at them, gathering sticks and doing that, or maybe being grateful. I mean, like naming 3 things that you're proud of that you did for the day, or what are 3 things that delight you with your kids right now, or something like that, or what delights you about the season, or really even sometimes just looking out the window or getting outside into nature. Sometimes obviously logistics, if you're running late, you can't do that. But, so those are just some ways I do those things.
So Valerie, what was the moment that made you begin your writing career focusing on mindset and anxiety?
That's a great question. I've always liked writing. That was just something I've always done, even growing up. I think it's always been very therapeutic for me to work through my emotions through writing. And every year on New Year's Eve, I would write, my goals, and like I did that since I was in high school. So like I remember always looking forward to that. And then I know when I turned 30, which I will be turning 40 soon. So this was 10 years ago. I wrote a summary on what I learned in my 30s. And I really enjoyed doing that. It was like, I don't know, not too terribly long, but I just wrote about what I learned and observed through my life. But that was before I had kids. And about 2 years ago, I was kind of, realizing that I was going to be writing it about my 40s, or what I learned in my 30s as opposed to in my 20s. And it's like, oh, well, I want to do that again. I really enjoyed it. But then I'm like, well, you know what? Why don't I start writing now? Why don't I start writing about everything I learned through becoming a mom and what I'm still learning? So that's what kind of brought out like more of the goal focus part of it. But always, when my child was in the NICU, for example, I wrote a lot afterwards about just random things, and like how I felt. And it was hard to write about certain things, like the trauma. Like I'm reminded of like when I was in college and bit by a German Shepherd. I was on a walk and all I wanted to do was get away. It seemed like it lasted for forever, but it was only for like, probably only 30 seconds. But in the NICU, it was similar, where it seemed like it was going on for forever. I just wanted to leave. I wanted to flee the situation. So throughout the procedures that we've had, I feel like I have had to work on that reaction versus response time. So like, I really had to work on redirecting those highways of, and with trauma, highways are in overdrive. So I'd say that's probably a little different, but I had to figure out how to, work with those emotions and give my control, give my trust to, if that be doctors for procedures, or just giving my trust to God, or letting my thoughts flow down the river. Like it was just time and time again, life showed me that I could not control the situation. So what can I do to allow these feelings, allow these thoughts to pass, but also by living in the moment? So writing helps me do that. And then, just thinking things from a different perspective. I remember in one procedure, like I felt like I had to give my control to the surgeon, like I was boarding an airplane. So like I had to take that flight. I had to trust in the pilot in order to get to that destination. And in that case, it was, that procedure I had to do. So those are the kind of things that I wrote about. And then just, I love I just love talking with moms. I feel like I was so alone in the first year or two mentally. I would say postpartum, I had more of the anxiety, a little bit of the OCD. But it was just hard. It was hard. Like I just, my identity was removed, I would say. Like we were talking about before, I became mom, which is such a beautiful name, but I didn't know who Valerie was anymore.
Right.
So
And
sorry.
I was just gonna say, and how quickly that fades when you become a
Yes,
mom too. So I just want to say that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. And I feel like the more I talked about this with moms and the more vulnerable I became about these emotions and feelings, I felt like I wasn't the only one. And it's like, gosh, I really feel like we need to support moms more. And that's what really inspired me, like to take the next step is to write and like actually like make it something where I want to share this with other people. So like I have my book written essentially, and I'm just kind of seeing where I want to go next. Like right now I'm doing a podcast where I talk a lot about that, and I talk with other moms who are guests a lot of the time, just talking about what they've learned. And I just want to empower moms and help moms love more in their lives. And everyone's different, but if we act in the name of love, I feel like just in general, like we just there's so much power to that. We have so much more power as moms than we realize. Like if you think about all the generations that will come after you and the ripple effects that will happen, it's just like mind-boggling when you think about the difference that you really can make in this world and through the course of history. And it all is it's you, and that's just so amazing to me as moms, and how blessed and privileged we are to navigate this life with motherhood, as well as being our the number one supporter and cheerleader to our kids. I think it's just so amazing. So I try to think of those things when I get frustrated, and like really put it into perspective of like, James Clear in Atomic Habits says, when you get frustrated, sometimes think about, I don't have to, I get to do these things. So like if my child is, sick and it's hard to sleep or something, like they're coughing, it's like, oh, I have to get up. It's like, well, like, yeah, I can think of that. But if I do a mental paradigm shift of, I get to do that, I'm not going to be able to do that for forever. And sometimes it's frustrating. They don't go to bed. So, especially in the summertime, like the sun doesn't go down until like 9:30 at night, and then they're running around like maniacs.
Yeah.
And so like, I'll sleep with them for a little bit in their room, and it can be annoying where it's like, oh, can't I just have them like just close the door and, watch a show or something, which, sometimes we do need to do that for ourselves. So we do, that is important. But at the same time, when I feel like I'm feeling the need to be there for my kids a little bit, like if I have to go in their room, and just thinking about, well, they're not going to want to do that for forever. So let me just enjoy this moment for what it is. Because I don't know, I'm probably going to want to do that when they're in college, and they're going to be like, no, mom, you're not coming. Be like that mom that's constantly like calling them up and
Well, you're
like,
right though. Yeah.
but like I feel like there's all these preconceived things of like what I thought I was going to be as a mom, and then like time and time again it's like,
It's the
oh,
total opposite.
that, and so we'll see what happens. But so yeah,
It's
sorry.
completely the total opposite of what you thought that
Yes,
that life
isn't that
would,
wild?
right? Yeah. And I feel like,
Yeah.
like you said, we all have the same thing in common, more than, than being different. We're all similar. But even
Yes.
even with myself, when, because they're 21, 13, and 11, and they're at a stage where I sometimes joke around with my husband, like, it would be nice to have like a baby again. And I always think like, yeah, no, yeah, I'm loving where we're at now, because they're
Yeah.
more independent. And then as they grow, they're gonna be even more independent. And like you said, they'll be in college, And then it'll be totally different. And then we'll be empty nesters. But I love how you said you have to get to you, finding yourself, because our children, we raise them to become an adult in society. So they're not going to be with us forever. So how do we live life without them? Because that's going to happen. So it's so important to find Valerie or Robbin just being outside of that mom bubble, So I love that you said that.
Absolutely. And a book that I just thought of when you mentioned that is, I think it's called Strong Mothers, Strong Sons by Dr. Meg Meeker. And she focuses obviously on sons. I think she does have a daughter's book as well, strong dads, strong daughters. But anyway, she talks about that where it's like, how do you model the kind of behavior and like the things that you want to see, because you're not going to be there for, you're not going to be, they're not going to want you to be there all the time. And like, so how can you like take the time now to do these things, but also recognize that, yes, you are yourself too, and showing them, which I think is so important, like, showing them that, I am going to take this time to myself because I need to fill my cup up. And so then we can play, like, I'll have more energy to do that. So yeah.
Yeah. What led you to start your podcast? I know you did mention wanting to empower other moms, other women. So what led you to starting the podcast?
It's kind of random, I would say. Like, I've never thought about doing a podcast before. Like, I always knew I wanted to write. Like, that was something I wanted to do. But podcasting, it just kind of came about when I found the amazing podcast of Dr. Andrew Huberman, the Huberman Lab. And I actually just saw him live in person last night at the
Very
show.
nice.
It was
Yeah.
amazing. My role model of podcaster. He's a scientist, a neuroscientist out of Stanford, and just comes out with stuff every week. Started it, I believe, 2020 or early 2021. And I would just listen to him, his episodes when I was running, or just, in the car. And the things he talked about was just so fascinating that I'm like, gosh, I would love to do this. I'd love to just talk about what I write about. And because my husband, for example, he does not like reading books as much as listening to audiobooks. And I'm like, well, maybe I can do that more to get, my idea out there more. So my husband's an IT consultant. So he helped me kind of
Start it up.
essentially like put in an Amazon shopping list. He's like, this is what you need. So I'm like, okay, I guess this is what I need. So I would not have been able to do it without him. And he's been teaching me how to do things since, and I've actually really enjoyed it. Like I've met amazing people like you, Robbin, as well as we go. Cause like, I don't have the answers as a mom. Like, I'm learning every day as well. But what I want to do is I want to journey together where we're learning together as moms. And, we're learning about mindfulness or learning about spirituality or learning about whatever it is that you feel called to learn or what excites you. And even, sometimes just listening to podcasts, like, in the car, if I have a long drive or something, it helps, like, just not feeling lonely, just to hear another voice talk about something. And I just think that's so amazing. We need more, we just need more people, more love, more of all of that in our lives.
Yeah. I'm right there with you too. I feel like it is something soothing about another voice. And that's why I listen to all my podcasts. I listen to it when I'm in the car, when I'm cooking, and it's kind of like a meditative state in a way, while I'm driving or while I'm cooking, or just where I can just kind of zone out, but I'm still listening and paying attention. Absolutely. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. I love, especially when I'm cleaning. Listen to them when I clean.
Yeah, well, right, because you're in the zone, right? It's our mind is just kind of taken away by it. But since you started podcasting, is it everything you thought it would be? Like, is there things that came up that you didn't think that would come up, or like how did you see it, I guess, in the beginning to what you're doing now?
Yeah. I think that, it's been interesting. Like, I absolutely love the idea of the growth mindset. Carol Dweck talks about this power of yet, and that we're always learning something new. We're always we don't necessarily fail. We just not yet. And they teach that more in schools, which I'm so glad that they do. And so I was very intimidated with all the podcasting, like technology part of it. I am not a technology guru at all. And so I've learned so much along the way. And it gives me confidence when my husband will say, okay, well, why don't you try to do this? And like, you do this now. And now I'm able to do X, Y, and Z. And I didn't think I was ever going to be able to do that. And so, and then, so I think that's helpful just in all areas of life, of just trying and taking that step. And, Andrew Huberman talks a lot about that neuroplasticity, of that, like where it feels uncomfortable, but that's where learning occurs, when it feels uncomfortable. And then strengthening that pathway, like I was talking about earlier, those like back roads as opposed to the highways. So that, excuse me, was a surprising part of the podcast that I learned, because my comfort zone would be just to like be a hermit and write. But now it's like, okay, I actually do go out. I can go out there and, excuse me, go out there and talk with people and listen to my own voice, which that also I really enjoyed, because, I don't think anyone really likes the sound of their own voice, but but it also is helpful in the sense where I'm like, oh, I really say that's amazing a lot. And so then I'm like, okay, let me try and work on that. Or it helps me understand, like, I'm a musician, or I used to be, I guess I still am. It's just my phase in life. I just am not able to play my flute as much as I used to, but I still love to do it. So the similarities of music and talking, I didn't really think of that, but it is. And so I think I've really enjoyed that aspect of podcasting, and incorporating how we tell a story, and how that's similar to playing music in a sense.
Yeah, it's definitely it's the art to it.
Yes.
Too. And it's like, once you really I've learned myself on, like, just along the way of just trying to make sure, how do you tell your story, kind of thing, because everyone loves a story.
Absolutely.
But I love the fact that you mentioned listening to your own voice. At my first my first few podcasts, I was like, oh God, I can't listen. I can't, because I would just like cringe. But now I'm more comfortable, and like you mentioned, when you're in the uncomfortable, that's where we grow. That's where we learn. And that's what we're supposed to do. How important is it to have a mindset of positivity and intentional thinking?
Well, I think it's so much easier said than done. And I think certain days are better, not better, but easier than others. Sometimes, like, I can totally train my thoughts to be like, oh, I'm going to, we're going to pick dandelions, and this is going to be like the most amazing hour ever in the fields. But then another, in the next hour, it's like, oh my gosh, I need to get inside right now.
That's when everything hits the fan.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Dandelions are everywhere, and finding them in the washing machine. Anyway, but so I think recognizing that, we aren't perfect, and we are going to, our minds, I think, have a certain default to it. I know with mine, I have a default of frustration and worry. That's kind of how I grew up, and I've been understanding that's like, it may have been like what I've both like, maybe there's like that's just how I'm wired, but also maybe that's what, like, I talk sometimes about, like, my house growing up was infected in a way, not from a germ of a virus or bacteria, but from frustration, and how that's so contagious, and it can you don't even know, like with the recording, for example, like you don't even know that you're passing it along, and you could pass it along generations. So that, again, awareness is that first step of it, I would say, of how do I redirect my thoughts into a more positive light? How can I not be as frustrated? How can I live more in the moment and be mindful and be intentional? And I think for me, that is really embracing that growth mindset and embracing that difficulty of, this may not feel comfortable right now, but I'm strengthening that pathway in my brain. I'm taking that back road. And the more I practice it, the easier it will get. So like with running, for example, like when I was training for the half marathon, like it just got easier over time to add on miles. Like I could not have done a half marathon, in that first month or the first 2 months of training, because I only was able to get to 2 miles, if that. But over time, I was able to get to 6 or 7 miles, and it would just get easier. But then some days, like I just didn't feel like running, and not being too hard on myself when that was the case either. So I think that's so similar to our brains and the way neuroplasticity works, and how the brain's a muscle, just like any other body part. Having it stronger, utilizing it, being intentional, that saying, like the neurons that fire together wire together. So trying to just do that every day, in whatever way I can. I write about like a couple of back roads. Like I talk a lot, like we were saying, about mindfulness, gratitude, compassion, and sometimes that self-compassion. It's not necessarily like, it's so important, being compassionate to others as well. But I think we sometimes don't think about self-compassion. And then smiling more, our body language. You had mentioned telling stories. Like, I think that's so important too. And values, like those type of things can all be back roads. And you could think of other ways that like fill your cup and help with your kind of change that mental shift and shift your brain to thinking of life in, maybe not thinking of life, but viewing life in a different way.
You're a nurse practitioner. Have you always known you wanted to become a nurse practitioner? Or is it something that you kind of just fell into?
It's absolutely something I just fell into. It was really, I guess I wrote about that in What I Learned About My 20s, I remember, because I was groomed and trained to be a musician. That was what I was going to do growing up. I played the flute, and I absolutely love performing. I'm so glad that I went to music school, and everything I've learned, my professors were absolutely amazing. But I always had this, thing inside that it just wasn't quite right. I didn't know what it was, that like I wanted to do something different, I guess. So I remember one day I was in piano class, because we had to take piano class, and there was a nurse who was a sub, and she just said like, "Oh, I'm a nurse, and I also play music." And I just didn't even think that was a possibility. And I just remember like being like, "Oh, that's really cool." And she compared like performing music to like doing like, some, I don't remember what it was, like being in the ER or something like that. And I remember taking a biology class. I'm like, this is amazing. So I guess long story short, once I started learning more about the brain, and that also, like I kind of fell into my first job as a nurse practitioner in pediatric neurology, which I did not think that was going to be, I wasn't going to do that. Like, it was just kind of like, it fell into place. And the doctors I worked with were just amazing people. They taught me so much. And I just fell in love with the brain and neuroscience, and I've always loved kids, and I love educating others on change, and like what change that they want to do. Like, so for example, like with exercising, healthy eating, that type of thing. as my career kind of evolved, I did more of like primary care type stuff. So I did pediatric neurology for a little bit, and then, did more of the primary care. So that's when I talked more about like preventative things like eating and exercise, and just incorporating all of that into life. So I just think it's interesting how like God will point you into those directions of like, there was absolutely nothing when I was growing up for me to think that, I was going to, I would have never thought that like we would be sitting here talking about these things. Like I would have thought I would be playing the flute for you right now, like if I was growing up. So it's just wild that, and then recognizing, gosh, who was it? Joseph Campbell. He talks a little bit about following your bliss, and you kind of know what brings you alive. I remember Andrew Huberman says like what makes you dazzle inside, and educating others and about their health and the brain, and helping moms makes me dazzle inside. And I love to see other moms be dazzled as well. But also, I guess an important thing too was with that NICU experience. I mean, that really was the shifter, that where I was always on the provider side as a nurse practitioner, but then when I became a mom on the other side, on the patient side, I saw how different healthcare was from that side, and it really empowered me to be like, we need more resources. We need more help to navigate stressful situations. And it's so needed through all aspects of healthcare. But that's another big reason why I'm glad I became a nurse practitioner, because I feel like I was able to see, the different sides once I saw that side, the patient side as well.
Did you become a nurse practitioner after you had your oldest?
No, I actually, I've been a nurse practitioner since 2009.
Okay.
So for a while.
Okay.
So most of, and it was interesting because, again, yeah, it is like this, I feel like life is so different once you become a mom, and
Yeah.
the values, not necessarily the values, but like the things that I don't know, things are a different importance now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, like, I just feel like I want to do something that makes me alive, that I feel like God is calling me to do, to help others. And I want my kids to see me following that passion so they can follow their passion. So I guess I'm a little bit more selective about like those things now, where I like to empower moms, but also help healthcare providers know that you can think outside of the box too. Like if you feel passion to help by whatever it is you feel like can assist healthcare in a better way. Like I think that's just amazing to do as well.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. I love how you weren't afraid to take that leap of faith,
Mm-hmm.
basically. What was the moment, like what was the moment of being a nurse practitioner where you kind of said to yourself, "Oh, I'm walking in my purpose. Like this is it for me."
I would say the day that I thought of that procedure that my baby had, when I viewed it as going on an airplane, because I learned so much about how I can't control
Yes.
the situation so many times. And we want to control things so much. And so I would say, I knew that God put me in the situations, like with my background, becoming a nurse practitioner. I hate that, I hate that we had to do the NICU. I really and that was a kind of a self blame thing for a while, and I had nothing to do with it. But I think as moms, we're always blaming ourselves for anything and ruminating about things. And but at the same time, I do feel like I learned so much from all those experiences. And so that day when I kind of thought of it in that paradigm, that mental shift of, we've been through so much and I've seen so much, but here's how I am going to take what I have experienced and help other people with that. And that also helps me, and it helps my daughter, and it helps like my family, and it's just that ripple in a pond of that. So that's when I really felt like, I guess, empowered. And that took a very long time. I mean, gosh, I've been a nurse practitioner since 2009. So like, and I do, I feel like we are called as healthcare providers. Healthcare providers are, I'm so thankful for all of us. And I am so thankful for everything that they do. I feel like is just, I'm so glad that God has called them to do those things. But just to continue to know that, you can also, do what makes you feel alive. And if that's what that is, then keep on doing it. But if it's not, I encourage you to look at your values and see what is it that makes you feel alive inside, or as Andrew Huberman says, feel dazzled.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your example of the plane and releasing that that power over to the pilot.
Yeah. My brother, he was the one that actually came up with it, which is funny because he's like the most bachelor of bachelors, I would say. Thanks, Brian. I'm sure he'll love that little
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to use that as well, if that's okay.
Yes, yeah.
Credit too.
We can credit Brian for that.
Well, Valerie, as we wrap up, I just want to ask you a few questions that I ask all my guests. What does God or the divine mean to you?
So I would say that with meeting my husband, I met him in Texas. I'm from Chicago, but I was in Texas for a while. I grew up in a very I guess academic household, where I was always learning about, the history of religion and all of that, and organized religion. And I didn't really feel the spirit in me with that. I love learning, but I remember when I met my husband, though, he's like, "Do you want to go to church with me one day?" And I was like, "Okay." So I did, because I liked him. And I'm like, okay, I'll go with this guy to church. And I just remember the pastor, it's like this Christian, like non-denominational church. I remember it's called Riverbend. It was in Austin, Texas. And just, he said something, and I was kind of struggling with anxiety at the moment. Mm-hmm. And he said, when you're going through life and there's the wipers, when you're driving a car, you have to just keep driving as opposed to focusing on the wipers. Because if you keep focusing on the wipers going back and forth, you can't, like, you could crash the car. Like, you can't keep moving, like, kind of like moving past, giving that control over, like, just keep driving, as opposed to focusing on like kind of the background noise sometimes. And he talked about like giving your anxiety to God. And I just remember like never thinking of it from that aspect. So I think the journey that I've had with my anxiety and my relationship with God has very much been from that seed that was planted, that my husband planted, back in Austin that day. And that pastor had said, because so many times, like, I don't have control, and we love and we do all of these things. But I also need God, and like, I need Jesus sometimes to just say, take the wheel. Like, I remember I was at a retreat that we had to write down our negative scripts, and we had to put them on blocks. I did not know I had to put them on blocks when I was writing them down. Like, I just wrote them down in a journal. They give us 1 minute and they're like, just write down everything negative you say about yourself. And I put like 10 or 15 things down. And then they're like, okay, we'll put them on blocks. And then you have to walk around with them for the rest of the day. And it was like, what the heck? Like, this is nuts. Like, I had literally 15 blocks I was holding and carrying, and people, it was at a hotel. Wow. And it was crazy. And it was when my first was still a baby. And I remember we planned to meet my husband and her during lunch or something. And I was carrying these blocks, and she saw me, and she was, I think, a toddler at the time, and she wanted me to pick her up. And I couldn't, because I was carrying 15 blocks. And so I had to physically put the blocks down in order to pick her up. And I remember reflecting on it later, because we had to reflect on it. And I'm like, yeah, I had to put the box down. But then I was thinking, like, that is so much of life. Like,
right.
I want to carry the box, and I have to figure out all these ways to carry these blocks. But if I just let go of these negative blocks, and for me, a lot of times it's giving those blocks to God. And that's what that pastor was saying, like giving that to God. But for other people, like, I know everyone's, their spirituality may be different, and maybe thinking of them as the blocks going down the river, like your thoughts are going down the river, or, whatever that may be. That was just so helpful for me. So really, giving my anxiety to God has been, that's made so much of a difference, I would say, and really strengthened my faith. And, that, again, I guess I'm referencing Andrew Huberman a lot today, because I just recently saw him, but he had a guest, I think it was Emily Balchetis, I believe. And she and him were talking about what is the most powerful sense that we have, and that's vision in the brain. Like, we believe what we see, and it's very hard to not believe what we see. But that's really what faith is. I mean, it's having faith in something that we don't necessarily see, because the brain doesn't question what we see. The brain will question what we hear, what we smell. But when we see something, it's like, oh, that's just kind of how our brain is wired. But our brain sometimes is tricky, and can get us into situations like these false alarms with the amygdala, and like with this, like, we only are going to believe what we see. Well, that's not necessarily the case all the time. Like, that's where faith comes in.
Yes, I love that. I love that. What is your spiritual practice?
As I think that's kind of changed over the years. I would say, what for me, like, I absolutely love, like, getting together with a group of other moms, and we actually will, like, read the Bible together, and we talk about life, and I really love that. I also just love being outside in nature. Like, that's, to me, like, there's nothing that brings me closer to God than seeing just these little reminders of how we're all connected in this world. Like, we really are. Like, if you, gosh, like, just looking at all the animals and how we're just all related in this mysterious planet, I think is just so, so cool. Like how my daughter will pick up, I think they're walnuts, but they have a heart in them. And I mentioned that to her one day, and now she always, like, picks up these little heart walnuts. So I look for those, or like we look for heart shapes, or I'm trying to think of an animal example that, I mean, a lot of the times I think of, like, the trees and how there's seasons of, the leaves will grow with sunlight in the spring and the summer, and they're green, with producing food with photosynthesis and all of that. But in the fall, or at least in the north, in the fall, the colors change to oranges and yellows and reds. But the orange and yellow process, that was in the leaves all along, and it was just kind of hidden from the chlorophyll, the green, in the spring and the summer. So when the sunlight decreases and the nights, the days are colder, it decreases that. So then you're seeing these beautiful colors that you would have not have normally seen if it was a sunny day or like a warm day, which I think is just so powerful as to, even though, like, we're not going to always have amazing days, like the days that aren't necessarily as sunny, you're still producing something beautiful inside. And I think that reminder is just so, that just comes straight from nature and straight from God and from nature. And then in the wintertime, like, just, it's the rest, and like, I will like with my lilies, for example, like they're so hardy, those plants, and like they just hang out there in the snow and like Chicago winters, and they, heck, they're
They
in the
survived
ground,
it.
they survive. And so, and then they always come back up in the spring. Like, and so sometimes remembering that there's can be difficult days and cold days and snow and just hard times, but eventually spring will come again.
Yeah.
And I think that's just, life has so many examples if you just kind of stop and look around. And we're all here together on this planet for a reason. And
yeah, I love that. That actually goes into my next question. How do you define love?
it depends probably on certain situations, but like as a mom, a love for our kids, like I feel like so much of it is a given. We love our kids. Like they're amazing. They're amazing. Gosh, I'll get emotional thinking about how much I love my kids. But utilizing love as an action, I think, is underrated in society, because we can have the feeling all day long of love. And that's an amazing feeling. And I don't want to discount that feeling. And we can love our neighbor, we can love our friends. And that's what's so beautiful about this life. But also, how do we put that to action? Because our actions are, again, another Andrew Huberman quote, but our actions is what is going to be what we are remembered for. That is what our legacy will be. It will be, how did we love? How did we keep moving forward when we did not want to move forward? When I was thinking about this podcast earlier, I was reminded of the concepts of Thanksgiving, and we all kind of know like the Thanksgiving story and all that. But what I think we don't talk about as much is how it became like an official holiday. Sarah Josepha Hale in the 19th century, in the 1800s, had petitioned essentially for Thanksgiving to be a holiday throughout the country. And this was during the Civil War time. And so it was celebrated more in the North, but not as much in the South. And she was like, this needs petitioning, I think, for years. She was kind of like a big magazine person. I don't remember what it was, Ladies Home Journal or one of the big ones back then. So finally, she was able to get it to Abraham Lincoln, who was the president, and he approved of it in 1863 when the Civil War was going on. And he approved of it, essentially saying like it's important to give Thanksgiving among chaos. And I think that's just so profound, with gratitude and love and action. As amongst chaos, you still love, you still say what you're grateful for, you still do those things. And so I just think that's just such a powerful story as to like the time. I feel like history has so many examples of just chaotic times, and like, with the pandemic and life now, it's no different. There's always chaos, but despite the chaos, how do we love more? How can we love our neighbors more? How can we love ourselves more? How can we fill our cup up more in order to fill others up? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess that's, I don't know if that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. How can we fill our cup up more to love others more? I love that.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who has influenced you the most?
As a mom, I would say that many people have. But the one that's always stands out for me is my grandma. And she, both my grandmas are amazing. I write about both of them, and I think they both are just awesome people. My rain grandma, I call her rain grandma because she had one of those 1970s oil lamps that it looked like the oil that came down. I mean, it was the thing back in the 70s. And I was, I guess this was in the 80s that I saw it, but I just remember being so fascinated by that thing. And she always had like those, she must have been very trendy because she always had like those earth tone colors and like with all of her decor. And so whenever I actually, whenever I think of autumn colors, I think of Rain Grandma too, because that looked like her house. But anyway, Rain Grandma was someone who smiled all the time. And I just remember her smile. It just meant the world to me. Like, it was this unconditional love smile that even when she got dementia later on in life, that smile was still there. And I try to honor Rain Grandma's legacy by smiling at my kids more. And I feel like she's there when I do those things. And then even researching smiling, like that's powerful in itself. Like our muscles tricking our brain. Like, if you want, again, like another mental paradigm shift thing is just to smile more. Like, studies show that, like, if you put a pin in your mouth and like kind of like have that smiling, like that tricks your brain. Some of the studies, like, I don't know, there's like mixed results, but there are quite a few out there that say, yes, this does help. Like Charles Darwin, I want to say, I'd have to confirm that, but I think he also came to a similar conclusion as well. And but I know for me, smiling does help. Like, if I just think of Rain Grandma and smile like her at my kids, we're all in a better mood. Like, it's just like babies, like that's the first thing babies see is, I think it's just so amazing. Their eyesight is directly to like where you hold a baby, like as a mom, like, here's the baby's eyes, and then here's your eyes. This is what they see. And that's just so awesome that they see your eyes and your smile the first thing. And Rain Grandma was she was very much the person that did that so much in my life. And I'm so thankful for her for that.
Yeah.
All that smiling.
It's contagious. It's definitely contagious. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What has life taught you so far?
I would say, hands down, that I do not have as much control as I thought I did. That I do not have control over life. And the only thing that I control is my actions and the way what's in my brain, and sometimes I can't even control that, but I can at least give myself grace to say, you know what, just not yet. Like, it maybe I didn't do as well today or during this hour, but I'm going to try again and build another pathway, and just not yet. I remember just when I was younger, being so obsessed with studying and stuff, being like, oh, like if I work hard. Thomas Jefferson is attributed to having this quote of, the more I work, the more luck I seem to have, which, yes, as study and hard work is so important, but there is an element of you just don't know what life's going to throw at you, and you just kind of have to keep marching forward. Sometimes that's just the next right thing. I remember like a perinatal counselor had told me that one time when I was having a lot of OCD, of when I'm in a mental loop of trying to control something, traveling in the future or in the past, ruminating, all I can do is be in the present and think of what is the next right thing. And that may just be brushing my teeth, and then going to the kitchen and making food, and just that's all you can really control, is what the present and what you're going to do next in the present.
Anything that you want to share with the guests? Do you have anything coming up? Or is there any last words you might want to say? And how can people follow you?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate this conversation, Robbin. It's just, I love talking with you. Like, I think you have just such an amazing presence, and I love it. And so, and I really appreciate the guests who are listening today. And you can follow me on my social media. So really everything I have is on my website, tomomistolove.com. You can access my podcast there. It's available on Spotify, Apple, and Google. It's called To Mom Is to Love with Valerie Probstfeld, NP. I'm also on social media. I'm trying to get more of a presence on YouTube as well. But if you want to subscribe, I would love that. And then just let me know. I would love to walk this journey of motherhood with you. And I just want you to remember to have more compassion for yourself and to love more in your life and yourself and your kids, just as you've been doing, because you are doing a great job.
Yeah. Yes, I love that, Valerie. I'll go ahead and put all of your information in the show notes too, so people can reach out to you. So
Thank you so much.
thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Conversations with Robbin. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do not forget to subscribe and like. Remember, every week we have new guests on our shows. Conversations that empower, inspire, and enlighten.